I think you're still muted, Jim.
So sometimes it just turns up muted on, on sign in, and sometimes it doesn't. I don't understand why, but that's just fine, I guess.
It's probably something I pressed when I set up the meeting, but
Oh, maybe that has something to do with it.
yeah.
Did have you heard has Gail contacted you about we're going to purchase a from Home Depot a big outdoor cabinet, a work, one of those work containers, to put all our stuff in, and
Excellent.
we were hoping that that you could use the credit card and order it in order to make it a tax. And you really have to be able to do that, because if I go down there and try to call you from Home Depot, it's just too complicated. But we can give you the 2 items that we need, and I'm sure she'll explain this all to you. But
Oh, that'll be great.
but but that way it'll go through the town, and we'll avoid taxes on $450 worth of stuff, which is always a good idea. And and they have the cabinet are in stock, so Graham and I will go down and pick it up, hopefully.
Okay.
I don't know when that's going to occur, but it's going to be quite soon. Having done a lot of research on this to find the right
Okay.
one.
Yeah, I'll just have to check with the treasurer. We've had to tighten up controls of the credit card.
Yeah.
Because with COVID, we have had extraordinary expenses.
Oh, I bet.
So I have to make sure that we have enough room on the credit card.
Okay.
But so it's good to know. Thank you for letting me know. I hadn't heard from Gail.
Yeah. Well, she's putting it together. She's just waiting to hear from Graham about the choice. But I think that would be a good idea, and we keep people out of the hut, which is really what we want to do, because strange things have happened.
Yeah.
So
And I think putting it in the front, I walked it with Graham, and the front seems to be the best spot. It's flat, and the back has enough room, but it's on a grade.
Right. It'll be facing the road, and
Yeah.
and that'll be so when folks come in, Tri-Wire or Surtex or Whip City Fiber to do repairs, it'll be right there in front of them. They won't be able to miss it.
Right.
Consider that's bright
That's
orange, huge bright orange container. It'll stand right out.
Oh, dear God.
Mm.
Well, I guess it's orange. Yeah, they kept referring to a metal container, and I was like, I can't visualize what you're talking about with a metal one. So
Well, it's 60 inches long by roughly 30 inches high by 24 deep. I think it's pretty good size. It weighs about 170, 180 pounds. And it's made by a company called Rigid, and Home Depot stocks them. And as long as you don't, and the color really enables it not to be lost. It's bright and shiny. So anyway,
right.
hopefully that won't be a problem.
Nope.
Add a little color to the to the parking lot there.
And if we don't like the color, we'll get some spray paint.
Well, I'm not sure that it's powder coated. This is powder coated steel for longevity purposes. So putting paint on it might not be terrific, but we could order other things, but they're not available locally, and they'd have to be ordered, all that kind of stuff. And we do want to pick it up, because I think Home Depot charges a rather hefty delivery fee out to Shutesbury, 37 or 40 bucks, and I can just stuff it in the back of my pickup truck. So when you do order it, be sure that they don't charge us money for delivery, which shouldn't be necessary anyway.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. I guess it's right at 7 p.m. now.
Yeah.
1, 2,
Yes, it is.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Everybody's here.
Oh.
Everybody, yeah, we've got everybody.
Excellent. Right at 7.
7 o'clock, can we call the meeting to order? All right. How is everybody?
Good.
Melody, you look like you're in another beautiful place tonight.
You're right.
Mhm.
Outer space.
Yes,
Mhm.
the stars.
It's like a virus-free kind of place.
An election-free type of place.
That's hard to find.
We also have we have Gail joining us tonight. She's going to. One of our topics is the web or the FinCom site on the web. So Gail's going to spend just a brief amount of time, about 10 minutes, or so, going over some topics related to our website.
Okay,
Do we want to do that first, Gail? Just maybe
that'd be good, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Jeff?
Yep. What's up, Jeff?
Jim, are you going to do the public comment at some point?
What we've been doing is we've been moving along the meeting. If someone has a comment regarding a specific topic, we've sort of done it at the time of that, because there really hasn't been too much, so it hasn't really interfered too much with getting our agenda through, at least so far. So for right now, there's no plan to have there is a section at the end of our meeting for items that aren't part of the agenda that we need to cover.
Well, could I just remind you of why the public comment was begun? It was because people may have things to say to the FinCom and can't stay around for the whole night or for every agenda item and would like to have something said at the beginning. So there was an opportunity afforded to do that right at the very beginning. So it was just out of consideration for the public.
Okay, well, that's something the Finance Committee can talk about, whether we prefer to do it that way, whether we could set aside 5 minutes or several minutes at the beginning of a meeting and cover all topics during that time. That's perfectly okay. But I think the Finance Committee would want to talk about that themselves if want to move in that direction.
Well, I didn't realize that we were changing.
Again, that's fine. I have no problem with just setting aside one topic at the beginning, one agenda item at the beginning, so everyone can get their points out that aren't part of the committee. Yeah, Les.
Muted. You're muted.
You're muted.
Hear me now?
Yeah.
Just a note of appreciation the way you've handled these past several meetings in allowing people to comment as we go along through the agenda, given the specific topics. So I hear what Jeff is saying. I appreciate that. I think that's important too. But just a note of appreciation is how you've been doing it as well.
Okay. Again, we can do it either way. As so far, we've been able to manage our agenda, allowing people to get in with their comments as we go on. But we can move to what Jeff is suggesting also, if the Finance Committee so chooses.
Did the Finance Committee change their policy on this last year?
Not that I know of.
And the whole point of making it 5 minutes is so they could speak and then be done, and then we would move on. We know that the first 5 minutes will be dedicated to somebody speaking. So we've been doing it this way, and we really haven't decided as a group to change it. I think we should continue to do it. I mean, that's why Jeff's here. He thought that he would have that opportunity. That's my position.
Okay, I guess we haven't always we've sort of mixed it up in the past, in the past year, but if that's not my understanding, we had a 5-minute section at the beginning. I guess I wasn't clear on that, George.
Well, I don't know. That's from when I was on the Finance Committee 2 years ago. I don't know. That's why I'm asking. Did you change the policy last year?
I can tell you that we haven't had that initial open comment period, at least since as long as I've been a member. So, that's
So at least the last
year and change. Yeah,
Got it. Okay.
it's more just been ad hoc throughout the meeting, as Leslie was suggesting earlier or describing earlier.
Yeah, we can certainly move toward that if the Finance Committee so chooses in that direction. But as of right now, as AJ say, it's more ad hoc. Okay, Gail?
Right. web committee has started a review of the various pages on the website, and we're checking, some of it's just editorial, is stuff up to date, do links work, and so on. But one of the things I'm concerned about is making the pages as easy to read as possible. So for your, could you enable me, please, for screen sharing?
Yeah, is that something,
I can do
Becky?
that. 1 second.
So several years ago, actually, the web committee made sort of a standard format for pages. Now, how can I get to my screen? I want to get. Oh. That's not what I want to share. Such that the title's at the top. This is the standard format that was set up for committees and departments several years ago. On the right-hand side are the
I
main
don't think we have the
contract.
right screen.
Pardon me?
I don't have, I have a list of Adobe.
Acrobat, we're looking at Acrobat.
PDFs.
I have, yeah, a list of PDFs on my screen.
It doesn't look like a department page.
It didn't go to the web page.
I love Mary Oliver, but I don't think this is what we want.
No. How's that?
There it
There you
is.
go.
Yep.
Yay,
Great.
okay.
Mhm.
I don't know why you get Mary Oliver. Anyway, so standard title, the first contract, and then contact, then below that, the members. And then below the members is this section on the minutes where the last 3 meetings are itemized right here on this one screen. And then a link to the entirety of the other minutes, and you can pull up any date you want. You've got minutes from 2010, for instance, posted for FinCom. But when I look at your page, why don't I go back? I see all this blank space here, and I see the list of minutes here, which are repeated in this section over here. So I'm wondering a couple of things. If these could be removed, since they're already contained here, and these links of information that you have could be brought into this main space where they'd be seen. And instead of just listing them like this, actually feature them as the Board of Health has done on their information, so that the title is itself a link either to a page or to a document. And there's then a sentence that describes what this thing is. So one of the things that I notice on your page, for instance, there's the title, but who knows what that is or why you would find it important, why you would want to get there. So my suggestion is that it get brought out into the main space and formatted the way the Board of Health has it, with the title linked and with a 1-sentence description. Would that meet with your approval?
Yes. Fine.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Yep.
I think then that it would be helpful if somebody would go through this list of documents, make sure that they're really the things you want to put out there, and give me a 1-sentence description of them. And then I'll post them and format them the way I described.
I'll do that.
Okay.
I do want to say that the reason it was arranged the current way is because there was an effort to make people aware of what a whole fiscal year's budget work looked like.
Uh-huh.
And from start to finish. And, you know, just sort of looking at it briefly, you can see some years took more meetings than others. So there is information sort of available there, but it wasn't that obvious.
Hey, Susie, what maybe our sort of snapshot of the calendar that we just worked on last meeting, would be a useful thing to include here in
Mhm.
place of this. That gives a,
Yeah.
that might be useful just for giving people a sense of the budget process and how it unfolds over the course of the year. Might be useful for departments to just quickly have a place they can see
That's a good idea.
when they're up in the schedule, and so that might
Well, mhm.
that might accomplish a similar thing and not be, you know, duplicative of stuff that's elsewhere on the page.
Yep.
And you could
sounds
get
good.
that to me, Susie?
Yep, I will.
Okay. Another question is about what you call here the annual reports. It hasn't been up since since fiscal year 2017. And I'm wondering if you want to continue this or simply drop it.
I think it is in other places,
Yes.
part of the annual town, yes, part of.
And we now have a page for the annual town report. The only one that's up there is this past one, since it was done digitally. I'm trying to get hold of records that were sent off to the printer that we could put up an PDF of previous years, but I don't have that at hand yet.
I think it's good information. I think
Yeah.
people who are interested in the finance committee and what the finance committee is doing can get a synopsis of each year by
Yeah.
clicking on each year right here.
Yeah.
Okay. Another way to get that is through the budget presentation at the annual town meeting.
That is the one.
This is the report. This is the chunk that was submitted as part of the annual report. But we've got a new page now for town meeting. Again, the same construct. With the minutes, there's going to be a section here where the warrants are done the same way as the minutes. And then additional information for the past several years. I'm missing some still, but this is when I asked you, Jim, for budgets
Yeah.
that were presented for a vote, and I'll fill these in. And because of this year, we had the board reports to the town meeting handy. I put them up as well. And your FinCom beautiful graphics is included in this. I could do it separately if you like. I'll get there. I will get there.
I think it's helpful to have the FinCom report on the FinCom page, separated from all the other reports from other committees and the annual minutes. Part of the problem has been the turnover on committees, keeping people aware of the responsibilities to the webpage and then
Right.
the way to do it. So if sending it to you and you post it in the right places, I think that would be a pretty good fix.
So when you refer to the report, though, are you looking at this, which is the report that was made to the annual town meeting
Yeah, it's multiple pages, right?
with the pretty graphics?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, this is a great thing. So I'll just post this separately on the FinCom page
Great.
and go back for previous years and do the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Cool.
is that agreed?
Is there a recording of our budget information session that happened before town meeting this year? Is that somewhere
believe
else on the
there
website?
That's on your page.
It is on our page? Okay.
The video is on your page.
Okay, good. I was just gonna suggest putting it there.
But that could be brought forward so it's a little more visible. It's right here.
So
Is
when
this
we,
what you mean, the joint meeting?
Yep, no, that's
No.
great. Oh, wait.
That's not the joint meeting.
that's
This is-
MLB.
Yeah, that's our
not
July,
it. That's
August meeting.
July 21st. It was, I think.
It's on the
June
select
22nd.
board page, I believe. So I think what we can do is be aware of what we want to have on our page and get it to Gail. It is in other places, but we can have a list of things, including our information session that comes just before town meeting.
Is that a standard operation? Is that a usual?
Well, the recording of it is because of Zoom and COVID, but there's always been an information session.
Aha, so we could set that up as a regular thing then.
Right,
Yeah, Susie, it has not been every year.
I think it's new this
just
year.
about. It's,
Should that be added to the town meeting page as well as part of the budget preparation?
well, it was on the select board page because the select board page handled all the getting ready stuff.
Okay, so we'll leave it there and then put it on the FinCom page
Mhm.
as well. Okay, so you're agreed with this general pattern, folks?
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay, and
Sounds great.
Susie, you'll send me stuff?
Mhm.
All righty.
Yeah, speaking of sending you stuff, Gail, there's
Yes,
a couple of maybe some things that need to be updated. So for example, you've got contacts and you've got Secretary as Robert Groves.
yes.
So that's really AJ, that's Secretary.
Okay.
And there's
didn't
probably
know
a
that.
couple others. I think what I'm going to suggest is, can you click on one of the members? Yeah. Okay, now Jim's information is correct, but I think some of the other members might need to be updated. Well, actually, and yeah, Jim,
That I do need to know, yes. These were
Yeah.
put on here by the appointment, officers appointed list and elected list, depending on what it is.
yeah.
So-
Let me click on Melody. Click on Melody. Yeah. So, for example, she's also on the personnel
I'll send,
personnel.
I can send those updates because that
Yeah.
happened inside our meeting, not on the appointment list that she works on.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
So Linda would not have that?
No, it's a internal appointment by the committee.
Okay. Good, yeah. Tell me that. It's an easy change. It's an
Yeah.
easy fix.
Super.
Okey doke, how do I get out of here?
Uh-oh.
How do I
The
get out of
door,
the?
the
You have to
door.
stay. You have to spend 2 hours with us, Gail.
Okay, thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
Bye.
Hi, Leslie,
Thanks.
neighbor.
Minutes from our last meeting. AJ just sent out minutes. Does everybody want to take a peek and review
Yeah.
minutes from our last meeting?
Look good to me.
Yeah.
Anybody still looking?
Just making sure that my notes that changed things were there.
Okay.
Okay. That looks good to me.
I make a motion, we accept the minutes.
A second. All those in favor or for the vote?
Arvanitis, aye.
Rotier, aye.
Bob Groves, you're on mute.
Hmm.
Okay.
That's an aye.
Hemingway, aye.
AJ,
Sorry, Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Walton, aye. Okay, minutes are approved. Okay, we want to get into OPEB review. And Becky, you sent us a couple of documents over the past days.
I tried to send out some explanations of what OPEP is from the last report that was updated, as well as the tool that we've been using that George created. George is the best one to walk us through the actual tool. So in general terms, OPEP is other personnel employee benefits.
Post-employment, right?
Post-employee benefits.
Post,
So it
yes.
means, basically it means the health insurance, and it is restricted almost all to health insurance. While for years, the municipalities have worked to develop out retirement plans that will be self-funding in the future. I mean, that are fully funded. Like, we make payments into the retirement fund every year, but our trust is on track to be fully funded on into the future. And people at the state realize that the health insurance benefits that municipalities have committed to making to their employees in retirement didn't have the same structure around them, so they couldn't be guaranteed to be available in the future. And it was determined that each town should create a trust fund and build out that trust fund to the point where it could be self-sustaining in the future through all the investments that are made into it. So that's the general purpose and overview of OPEB. Does anyone have a question about that to start with? Nope. Okay, so then the big question is, how do you determine how much has to be funded? Well, every 2 years, 2 or 3 years, there's an actuarial audit done and an OPEB report produced. And I believe I sent you all a copy of the report.
That's every 2 years, Becky? There's an audit?
I think it's 2 or 3. I can't swear to you.
So what you
It
sent
used
us is the most, what you sent us is the most recent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It used to be, originally it was every 5 years, then it went to 3, but I think it's gone to, it's either still at 3 or gone to 2. So in looking through that report, you'll see a lot of demographics information, all the employees that we have, and then they do a projection of how many of those employees will receive retirement benefits, and they come up with a number to shoot for, how much, what the OPEB liability will be in the future. I think we have until 2038 to become fully funded. Our current liability, if you look at, so there's the worksheet, which is a spreadsheet, is where we're going to focus today. George had sent me an updated one. I sent out what I had from last year. It's pretty close, but what I sent you later this afternoon is the one that that I just sent, that George went through and made sure had the latest starting balance for FY21 of $599,199. And this tool that George put together is a tool that we can use to look at what will happen if we change our cash contribution, or if we change our appropriated contribution. And this is where I'll turn it over to George to explain how we could make changes that would help us achieve where we want to go. Our current liability, again, is $2,488,000 $654. So we're about a quarter of the way there this year. But that number, every time we do an audit, gets larger. So it's a moving target.
May I ask a question, Becky, please?
Sure.
Yeah, I understand that that variable, and I understand the projections, and I understand the fiduciary responsibility to fund our liabilities as they accumulate. What I don't understand is whether we ever have a discussion about the benefit, the other variable, which is the benefit. So whose insurance does this represent? Does this represent the teachers as well as the other town employees, or is this town employees other than teachers?
It includes the teachers.
Okay.
It's all municipal employees.
All municipal employees. So I know the teachers are a separate category in some regard, some cases. That's why I asked. The only other thing I'd like to ask is, what is the benefit? I mean, is this something that's contractual, reviewed every contract period? Is it changed? How is this? How are our future liabilities determined?
They were determined by a town meeting vote about 15 years ago, I think. I can't swear to the exact year. But when the town voted to extend retiree health insurance benefits to all town employees, the commitment was to do it at the rate of 50% of the health insurance liability. And that was a town meeting vote done about 15 years ago.
Right. And so all I'm bringing up this issue for is not because I have a position on it, but I just wanted to bring it up because when something is voted 15 years ago, it does not necessarily mean it's for perpetuity. These are things that can be reviewed on occasion, after a period of years, and see if it's still something that the current voters want to support. And, that's something legitimate to look at because it's a considerable amount of money. And there might be some ways that some things we want to change about it. So we're just talking about accepting a 15-year-old vote without reviewing whether it's still something appropriate in our budget. So that's why I'm raising it.
It's more complicated than that, Bob. It's also what the town elected to do was at the recommendation of town council because it's state law. And the state law requires that the towns fund retirees up to 50%.
Oh, really? See, I was not aware of that. So thank you for making me aware of that. I was not aware that this was a mandatory thing. I thought that it was a benefit that was given by choice.
No, it's if we had gone for a higher percentage, that would have been above what the requirement was. But when we voted it, the requirement was at 50%.
Okay, again, I'll stop asking questions, but one more thing that puzzles me is what is the benefit? I mean, is it, for example, in my case, I'm a Medicare and I pay, I have a plan that I purchase, which is supplemental. It costs me $126 a month. It's a pretty good plan from Fallon Health Care. And, that's very reasonable. I mean, I pay $126 plus I pay my Medicare. Which I'm not sure, I don't remember what that is, but it's about $135 or $40. So right there, that's pretty cheap. Is that what we're getting that kind of deal here, or are we going somewhere else?
Part of the vote at the same time was to require that all town employees register for Medicaid? Medicare. When they turn 65. They still have the option to have the other health insurance while they're still working, but when they when they're not working anymore, it drops to the Medicare.
But so we provide with the supplemental. Probably, that's my guess. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't be spending all this money for retirees. I mean, most retirees are 65, or I think.
Well, part of the problem is like when you have some retirees that retire at 60,
yeah,
you end up paying that for their full health insurance till they're 65.
Yeah.
And we have a case of that happening right now.
Sure.
So municipal employees can purchase or get health insurance through the federal government? even though they didn't have FICA withheld out of their paychecks?
Oh, we pay Medicare, George. It's in our budget, I think.
Yeah, we pay Medicare. We don't pay, we don't
Got it.
pay
Right,
FICA.
okay.
Isn't the fact that Medicare has worked its way a little bit into the OPEB system, so to speak, isn't this a fairly recent phenomenon? As I recall, it wasn't that way before. At least that's what I've been reading online. In other words, yeah. In other words, it's just recently that it turns out that some of our retirees can benefit from from Medicare, which certainly is fiscally a lot more stable than the Massachusetts plan.
It started quite a while back. I'm like, again, I'm not sure if it was like 20 years ago, but it was, you're right. It wasn't forever. It wasn't in 72, but there was a transition after 72.
Good for that. That's a good development.
Yep.
How likely is it that the state is going to do something about this? Because I think it's generally acknowledged that it's one of these unfunded mandates. You know, they created this program in 1988, and towns have been reeling ever since. And I think there's only 3 or 4 towns in the state that have actually fully funded this, and most everyone else is way behind, as I'm sure George is about to tell us. So is there any chance that the state in 2014, this was discussed with the legislature, there were proposals made and they all got shot down, and that was the end of any sort of revision to the original setup, so to speak. Any chance that the state is going to step in and fix this?
My inclination is no. I think if they do step in, it will be to set up a system of penalties for those who aren't complying. We used to be way out in front on OPEB, but many other communities are aggressively addressing it. So the numbers have shifted since 12 years ago or 10 years ago on the number of towns that are starting to get on board. Like Amherst hadn't done anything until 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So people are taking it more seriously. It's become an issue that's shows up on your balance sheet. So if you want to go out to bond, you have to be addressing this issue. So even though it's not yet required by the state, the feeling is that they will not step in to fund it, but they will step in to make sure we're held responsible for it.
What a deal.
Yeah. I think Mike has a question.
Yeah.
Mike, we lost you.
Yeah. Hey, so did I hear right that once a retiree is 65 years old, then they go on Medicare? Is that correct?
They sign up for it. But you still can have coverage with your, when you're 66, you can still have your full health insurance from the town. But you have to be, Susie, could you unmute? She's just done it, so. I can't
still
hear
on
you,
mute.
Susie.
If you're working, if you're still working, you can get coverage from the town beyond 65.
Right. So you don't go on Medicare till you stop working.
Okay, so if you're a retiree and 65, then you're on Medicare. And is the town's responsibility for healthcare then over with?
No, the town is responsible for 50% of the retirees' health care.
But you're on Medicare. So what, I'm not quite sure what is
50% of the
getting
Medicare.
50% of Medicare.
But not the supplement?
Up to supplemental.
So there's various supplements that you can get as a Medicare retiree. Are they obligated? Is there something that the town says they have to get, or are they limited to a particular program or something?
I can get the exact, I apologize, I don't have the exact details on that. I can talk to Ryan and have that for the next meeting. So you can get an answer to that question.
Okay, so
The
is,
numbers I've seen have been like $265 as 50% of the plan, I think. So but I don't know if that's the total and we pay 50%, because I know retirees send in checks to pay the other part. So I don't want to give you bad information, Mike, so let me get the correct answer.
I'd like to ask,
on
Susan.
that
Okay,
about
so-
the supplemental.
Oh, go ahead, sorry, Mike.
so Ryan is the point of contact for OPEB then, is that correct?
Well, he's the point of contact for retiree health insurance and all health insurance.
Okay, and do you happen to know how many employees are currently covered under OPEB?
I can't give you an exact figure. I'm thinking about,
75.
no,
Is it on this chart, the 52 plus?
75
be in
would
the
be the
report.
total number of employees.
You get the total number, including employees and retirees. At least that's what my numbers are here.
Because there's about 58, I
Fi-
think, employees. So it's 20, around 20 on retirees.
On this chart.
So I'm confused. And so there's employees that are covered under OPEB, although I thought that was for post employment.
Retiree employees who have retired. I should have just called them retirees.
Is there a
The total
vesting?
amount, because everyone has been classified as employees, and then we have the group that are covered by OPEB that have retired.
Okay, and then I heard a number, there's 75 and 75 and 23. What was that breakdown again?
75 would be the total number of employees that are actively working and that have retired, that are within our health insurance program.
But you broke up there, Becky. Can you say that again?
Sure. 75 includes all the current active employees and all the insured retirees.
There's a breakdown of that.
Yeah.
53 are active and 22 are retired or disabled.
That report has a lot of information. Maybe people should look at that report.
Melody, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just was wondering, is there a vesting period? How long does somebody have to work as a municipal employee to get this benefit before they retire?
I think it is at 10 years. I believe it's 10 years.
George, do you want to lead us through some of this?
Yeah, you want me to just show you the spreadsheet?
That might be best. So we're all looking at the same thing.
Well, yeah, or Becky or I can bring it up on the screen.
Yeah.
Can I share?
I will give you permission. Sorry, where's George? We're the one person covered up.
So Becky, when we talk about that total liability, 2.488, $2.5 million, that's the present value of all future payments that the actuaries calculated, right?
Yep.
Based on the last audit, right? That's from the last audit. And Becky,
2018.
you said that always goes up with each of these audits based on more people retiring or the cost of benefits going up, or?
It's more people retiring because Shutesbury, until that vote about 20 years ago, only had one woman named Edna who we were paying any retirement benefits to,
Okay.
medical benefits to.
So this is a this is a spreadsheet that I built quite a long time ago. Maybe needs a little work. Don't know. We can figure that out. It's got two main. Well, first of all, there's the liability right there. That's the present value of all the payments that we are estimating that the actuaries estimate that we'll have to pay. This
this
Yeah,
section
George,
here,
just one question on that number. Does that equate to 50% of the liability? That's the part of the liability that Shutesbury is responsible
it's
for?
the amount of money that Shutesbury would have to pay,
Okay.
which is 50% of the benefit. Can everybody see this? Is this large enough? Should I expand it?
No,
It's
That's
fine.
good.
Okay. Right, so this is just what we will have to pay. So basically you could say double it and that's what the total insurance will be. But
Where's
roughly,
the rest of this? Is it state funding that covers the rest, or federal, or where's?
The
where's-
employee- they
Individual.
have to pay for it.
their own self.
Okay,
Yeah, they're writing checks.
okay. Got
So
it.
there's two main sections of this. This section is showing how the fund is going to grow. Our current balance at the end of the most recent balance on our reports is just under 600,000. And then we pay into it 50,000 a year through the budget, through the operating budget. It earns interest, and so the balance grows. And then we have the starting balance coming from the ending balance, and we repeat the cycle, and it just grows. For these first 12 years, this model is basically assuming that we're just growing it and we're not spending anything from it. So where we think we're at 600,000 today, we expect to be roughly at, in 12 years from today, about 1.5 million, based on these assumptions. I won't get into the assumptions. The other side of this table over here is showing us this number is what the actuaries are estimating that we are going to pay in OPEB benefits in 2021. This is to the 23 people that are currently retired or disabled. And then the actuaries do estimates into the future based on those 75 individuals, the timing of each one's retirement, factor in inflation in the cost of health insurance. And this is what they're calculating the present value of. They're looking at all these payments, and you can see what they are estimating they will be in the future. They go beyond 2071, but they take all those payments and they boil it down to, at current interest rates, what we should have funded now so that we can afford to pay those people. And this is what the law is saying we should have set aside and ready to go. We got 20 years to do it from today, from 2020, but that's what the number would be today if we were supposed to be fully funded. And it's like Becky said earlier, when it comes to retirement benefits, the actual income from for retirees, that has been required. It's been a big issue probably 30, 40 years ago where companies weren't funding it. The federal laws changed, and even municipal governments were forced to fund that and have it fully funded, or at least the actuarial liability funded. Then about 10, probably 13 years ago, the state said, well, you know, you've got this benefit too, you need to start funding it. And so that's really what this conversation is about. So,
May I interrupt you for 1 second?
Sure.
The benefit of 113,016, which we paid this year, do we pay out of our budget for healthcare? Is that where that?
well, that's where I was going next. That's in our health insurance line. That's part of the health insurance line. And that's the point I want everybody to understand, is we're paying it already. In fact, what we're paying annually for OPEB is 163 in the current fiscal year, because we're paying the 113 plus the 50. So this is what Shutesbury is contributing. This is, if we continue the 50,000 each year, this is what we're going to pay to the retirees. This is what the actuaries think we're going to be paying each year. And by the way, this $50,000, talk about the present value of money, this is becoming less and less of a contribution as time goes on. When you look at and compare it to this, in relation to this. So just another point, but in our current fiscal year, we've budgeted for $163,000 of OPEB, and it builds up. And the whole point of having a fund is, as this gets bigger, this gets larger, now we'll have some money set aside to help pay for it. Especially, you know, looking at these numbers in the out years, it gets pretty darn big. So those are the key points. I have a column in here for, well, let's look at where we are right now. If we decide that we are not going to use any of the fund until 2033, again, we're up to 1.5 million.
we have some decisions that we'll have to make as a town, certainly not tonight, not even necessarily in the next year or two, but how much are we really willing to fund out of the budget? And at what point do we want the fund to start supplementing the payments to these retirees? And in this model, I've made an assumption that we wouldn't pay more than $200,000 in today's dollars. I've got inflation at 2.5, and it starts right here. That's the limit. And then it goes up by 2.5% every year. And then I set it at 200. It comes out to this year, it gets up to 268 in value. That's 13, 14 years out. And then what happens is our liability, our payment, this plus that is 268 equals that number. Well, what am I doing here? So I haven't worked with this in a while, so I'm a little rusty on it. But we get, oh, you know what this is? I put in here the date to start drawing. So I said, let's assume 2029, but it doesn't take 2029 because we didn't hit that limit yet. And all of a sudden, I guess we get close to the limit here. We must hit it right here. So now it's drawing from the OPEB trust fund.
I see.
And now what we get is we get a decrease out of the OPEB trust fund. And once we start doing that, then you can see the numbers start to grow and grow because we have this limit here based on inflation. Under this particular assumption, and we can run this model many different ways. We can talk about all the options. In fact, one of the things I need to do is I have a summary sheet here where we can look at various options, when to start using the fund, what's the maximum amount we want to pay out of our budget, and then get the stats onto when what year we start to draw, but when the funds run out, and I'll show you that in a second. So I'm sorry for jumping around. Under this current scenario where we're just continuing to put in $50,000 a year, and we have this limit of 200 growing for inflation, and we get to this point where we start drawing and we continue to only put in 50,000 a year while the liability, the payments are going up, we run out of funds in 2058, the year I turn 100. So, and you can see that we never even get to the 2,488,000. The balance peaks out right in here somewhere. This is where we peak in these years. So the point is, if these actuarial estimates are reasonable and we continue only to fund at 50,000 a year and continue to pay the bills out of the operating budget beyond the 50,000, we still run out. We run out within 20 years of actually having to fund the liability. Now we're not on track to fund the liability. I think that's a real important point. We're supposed to hit this number in 2040. We come close, but we're not quite there. We could hit the number possibly if we raise this limit. Oops. We'll raise it to that, and then we stop. We don't draw as early. Now we're there. We've hit our liability. Of course, that's today's liability. That liability is going to grow over time because these numbers are going to grow for inflation, and the closer we get to the point where this has to be fully funded, the more we're going to have to make up if we don't start putting money in now. So it could be tricky. So that's the way to use this model is let's ask ourselves, what are we comfortable doing? Do we think we need to grow this every so often? I know that, it does put stress on the budget. We have it built in, so it doesn't really cause increases. But it seems to me either we're going to have to increase this in the future, or we need to think about free cash transfers into the fund. And that's what this does. So let me go back to our 200,000. And then what if we did decide to put in 100,000? So let's say in the next fiscal year, you can see our numbers jumped. And so we can play around with how much money, how frequently to put money in here to get a sense of how this grows. how quickly do we get to that number? How much longer does our money end? I put 100,000 in, it got us an extra year.
Which is,
So that shows you the magnitude of the problem. And, anybody who reads those glossy brochures that you get from your employer about your 401k plan, for those of us who work for companies, they'll tell you, it talks many times, there's these little articles about the benefit of putting money away sooner. Smaller amounts sooner gets you more down the road than larger amounts later, is a common theme in many of the periodicals I've read. So,
Yeah, but George, isn't that with normal types of investments? In this case, we're using like bank interest rates, right?
well, it's true in any, it's true in any, no matter what kind of return you get,
So
whether
we're
you get
using a very
2%
low
return or a
return on this.
10%.
We're using a much lower return on this than,
Well, we need to talk to the treasurer about that, because when we met with the treasurer a few years ago, I was told if we have over $1 million, we can get 4% on our money. I doubt that that's true now. So that's built in this model. I left it that way because that actually makes, and I probably shouldn't, that makes the picture look rosier than it really is.
yeah, because that's where you really get the compounding from early investments in this, is when you have higher annual returns. If you have a very low annual return.
It's not going to be any better if you wait later to put money in, though.
well,
You're going to have much more to leverage. You're going to have a lot more leverage if you have a higher annual return.
Yeah, that's true. But, we can only get what we can get. I don't believe that we're allowed to invest any other way than in conservative, safe investments. The concept of putting money away sooner and having it grow longer is still true.
Yeah, I guess my only point was, yeah, you will, the earlier you put money in, the more leverage you're going to get from it. But these rates are so low, you're not going to get an enormous amount of leverage.
Well, remember, the rates now are not necessarily the rates in 5 years from now, or down in 20 years, 24 years, 14, whatever years from now.
The chart of the interest shows a big bump once we get to $1 million, and we're not sure what the percent will really be, but it looked like a goal. We're not that far away from getting up to $1 million on the chart, so maybe it'd be worth trying to get there and cause the interest rate to go up.
it's not going to go up to 4%.
Yeah, not in today's world. In today's world,
Is there another variable? Two variables stand out to me, if I may. The national health care, universal health care, I believe will happen within 10 years. That's going to change this whole chart. The assumption this chart will disappear. That's number one. Number two, if the cost of early retirement is excessively high in my understanding of the way this has been described, people who retire when they're 50 years old or 55 years old are very expensive. We could change the rules with new hires to make them pay a larger percentage if they want to retire at that age. That would change these numbers considerably too, because those are very expensive non-employees, basically retirees, and so I think that's something for the town to look at but I really do believe, and maybe I'm an optimist, but I do believe that national health care is on the way, and that's going to make our situation and many other towns much better in the future. I mean, we're talking about 30 years from now. You don't think we're going to get it by then?
We haven't gotten it in the last 100. I mean, wasn't it World War II? Right? FDR was president when that whole debate went on, and FDR lost.
Yeah.
It wasn't 100 years ago, it was 80 years ago.
I have a question too, and I'm sorry to keep harping on vesting, but I'm just wondering, is that mandated also, the 10 years to vest? Because kind of, if you're looking for cost savings, you can increase the years of vesting. I mean, why is it 10 years? I mean, a lot of places you don't get, for that kind of health benefit, you'd make people wait 15 or 20, in terms of the service that they would give in order to get that benefit. I mean, 10 years is very generous.
I think we're going back to state statute again. I don't believe
That's what I was asking.
Yeah, it's not a municipal option. And there was an effort to change it from 10 about 5 years ago. And I believe in the end it didn't pass. But there was a lot of talk about it, and there was a lot of pushback from from unions and others, but I'll double check on the 10-year vesting and make sure that it did hold. But
And if that's really state mandated or something, because if there's any leeway, that's an area to look at.
Hey, George, can you just clarify for me, just a technical question here. So the actuarial analysis that is embedded in here, is that making assumptions about when current employees are likely to retire? So out of the 75 or whatever the number was, then the actual number of retired employees is growing over the course of these years? Is that sort of built into the analysis here?
in the study, in the actuarial study, it is. George, we can't hear you.
You can't hear me? No?
Now we can.
Now.
Yeah, now we can.
Yeah, the actuaries, that's what they do. I mean, they have
Okay.
formulas, they have standards that they use based on the current hires and
Okay.
costs and interest rates, and they just estimate these numbers. This comes right out of the audit report, out of the actuary report, by the way.
Okay.
That's where I got.
And I
these
guess,
numbers.
so I guess the follow-up question then is I'm wondering if they've included some factor about the kind of growing pool. I mean, it's fixed right now at 75, but obviously that number is gonna grow over time as folks retire and we rehire.
Right,
those
I'm sure
positions.
they take that into consideration. When
Okay,
you
all right. I thought I heard something earlier in when you were describing this that I must have missed it then. Okay.
Well,
got
I
you.
may have said something
Okay.
that wasn't quite accurate either. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not an expert on this. I know this model. I put this model together. It's a pretty simple model. It's just, it's growing based on the inputs, and then it's taking money out, based on how we want to do this, to what extent. So it's a pretty simple model, but this is all from the auditors, the actuaries report.
Is there a quick way to just model just that same 2.5% inflation factor on the annual appropriation that we make? So instead of it being $50,000 a year, if we grew that using the same.
Oh, you're
Say
talking
again?
about this here.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm talking about column D.
All right. So, well, I could easily do that. I mean, that's really not hard to do. If we decided next year we wanted to increase this by 2.5%, and we want to do that every year,
Yeah.
boom, so what impact does that have? It helps, but
Helps, but it's not huge. Okay.
yeah, we run out of money. Well, I don't know. We've been messing around with this so much. I don't even know, and that's an important point. We can talk about what kind of options do we want to consider, and I'm happy to lay those out, run this model, put those in, and send everybody a summary of all the different options.
Mhm.
This is a fixed amount, start drawing in 2029, or different maximums. So we can talk about that. I'm happy to do whatever, and get us a better sense. I think we still have time, but it took us, we've been doing this for about 12, I don't know, Becky, you know better than I do, maybe 14 years. We've been putting $50,000 a year in.
Yeah.
And we've made one cash contribution, 150 or 125,000 at one point. And in that period of time, we've gotten it up to 600,000. That's right. That's a quarter of our liability. It's less than a quarter of our liability. So we have to go 3 times this to get to this in the course of 20 years. And, we're a third of the way through, a little past third of the way through, and we got a quarter there. So, I don't want to be an alarmist, but I do think that some cash contribution options, looking at those, is not a bad idea. Bob's idea about, and maybe Melody's idea, if we have options there, certainly those will affect this number. And if this number comes down, then certainly these numbers last longer, these balances last longer.
I have another question. Not to geek out here a little bit, but is it possible to see the mortality assumptions for the actuaries use? Because, you know, if they're not using enough women's lifetimes, if they're assuming more blue collar physical work as opposed to office work. I did this kind of stuff in my last job, and so I'm just kind of curious what the assumptions are that are being used, because that can actually have an
Wouldn't it-
impact if they're
wouldn't
using
that be in the
incorrect
standard
mortality
report?
assumptions.
Wouldn't that be in the standard report?
Yeah, I don't know.
There's a lot in the report.
Yeah, I think it's in there.
It's in there? Okay.
I think it's required that they put in all their assumptions.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like
I'll look at that again. I was just curious.
page 17 of the report is a
Right.
list, includes a list of the actuarial assumptions.
Okay.
I don't know how thorough it is, but you know.
Thank you.
Well, here, we can take a quick look.
Mm,
We shouldn't spend a lot of time here. I know that.
We
We've got a
won't.
full
No,
agenda today.
I'm happy to look at it on my own. I'm not trying to derail anything.
No, of course not. So anyway,
Everybody's
so
learning
think
now.
about that. I mean, AJ's idea was a really good idea, growing this each year. I know that interest rates aren't great now, but who knows what interest rates are going to be like in 4 or 5 years. You know, this Fed has been keeping interest rates low forever. It seems like it can never change, but at some point you got to think inflation is going to take off, and they're going to be forced to put the squeeze on money, and that's going to cause this to go up. And we talked exactly about what Susie just suggested, and that is getting to 1 million anyways and taking advantage, even if it's 1%. It's going to get us double of what we would normally get. I mean, this number jumps by double roughly. I mean, obviously it's on a different balance, but it helps us a lot. So if we get there sooner, compounding even at 2% is better than, you know, not compounding at all. So think about some options. If we want to revisit this, or if anybody wants to email me any way they want to look at this, what would happen if we put in 150,000 in the next fiscal year? What if we put in 100 in the next 3 fiscal years? What if we increase this by a certain percentage, either annually or maybe by 30,000 every 5 years? I don't know. Think about it. Or, you know, we've got long-term modeling, which is something I think we need to talk about as well. And if we look at our long-term models at the higher level, at our budget level, and we see opportunities in the future to add money to the budget that doesn't necessarily increase taxes, we might want to ask ourselves, well, what would happen if we increase this by a certain dollar amount in those years? So there's a lot of different ways to look at this.
Yeah,
And, you know,
George or Becky, just a question about, you mentioned, George, we're about a quarter of the way where we need to be for what, the year 2040 or 2030?
2040, I think, is the year we have to be.
2040.
Yeah.
2040, we have to be fully funding the liability.
Yeah. So what's your sense for, you know, you or Becky, what's your sense for, you know, based on where we are today, how that stacks up with where we think a healthy community and, you know, a healthy Massachusetts community and where they are today with regard to funding their
If we don't add any more money, we're not going to, first of all, we're not going to meet the statutory requirement. And clearly, by that definition, we're not going to be as good as any of the other towns because they're all required to do it. At the
yeah, but we don't
like,
know, are all towns in Massachusetts possibly also behind? In where
lots of them.
Yeah.
There's only about a dozen that are on top of it, totally on top of it.
And it's the larger communities with large finance departments and huge budgets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if we got back to what we had done originally, if we were increasing from 50 to using free cash, going up 10,000 in the budget again and getting up to 100,000 within another 5 years, George, I think we're right on the money. I haven't
So
run it.
you're saying use 100,000 in here.
Yeah.
It would come from
But
the
it would
budget
be
and free cash.
Well, this would be 60 and 40 in cash account, then 70 and 30 in cash
Oh, good
account.
point. Right. All right. So increase this.
Oops.
Yeah.
And make up the difference here.
Yeah.
George's.
So,
And then the rest of these become 100. If we were.
right. Thank you. Now we make it out to when I'm 98. Well, I don't know how we got to the other one. Oh, the other one had 4%. So not that I think it'll be 4%, but then that brings us out an extra 4 years. So that's how difficult this thing is. I mean, it
Wow.
really takes a lot to make this happen. Now, look at our numbers, though. I mean, these are great numbers here. We're really doing well here. But it doesn't sustain us.
But you also said that that 2.5 million that we have today for total OPEB, that's a moving target. That's going to continue to grow every audit, right?
A
It
little
has been
bit.
growing. I don't like to make predictions.
Yeah.
It was about 2 million on the last audit, and before that was about 1.5 or 6.
The
And
first
that's-
time I saw this, Becky, 10 years ago, it was 770.
Yeah.
So that's,
George, aren't we doing an awful lot better than most towns are?
I don't really know. I think we addressed it sooner. I don't really know because I'm not locked into what's going on in other towns. I do know that I was at one of Stan Rosenberg's annual events 6-7 years ago, and they were showing the stats, and a lot of towns were way behind. A lot of towns hadn't started, and we had, and we were ahead in that respect. And we've been consistent, which has been good. But I don't know how we're stacking up to other towns.
Right.
For me, I don't think that's relevant. I think what's relevant is what our liability is and when we have to reach that liability. And that's what we should be planning for. You know?
The big change is the amount of interest we're getting.
you mean it being reduced?
No, going up to 100,000, the amount of interest jumped
Million.
dramatically.
Going up to a
A
million.
million where it changes.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you can count on that. On that interest rate going up.
Not that high, that's for sure. It's going to be
No,
more
I-
like maybe that.
Well,
But
Yeah, I think it's in the 2.5 to 3, to 3% range. At least that's the way it looks now.
yeah,
But it is a way of increasing the funding because it comes in through interest. So whether it goes up 1 more percent or 2 more percent or whatever, it's a
yes.
strategy. And we have ways of getting there.
We certainly want to see numbers like this every year, and not
I've
numbers.
got
you know.
I've got a question. Jim, I had a question.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I can't see. I can't
Mike-
see.
It's Mike Vinsky asking.
Mike, yeah. Mike.
There's something doesn't seem to be right with this chart, and maybe I don't understand the concept of the total liability, but I thought that the $2.5 million total liability, if we had that in our account as of June 30th, 2019, that this would be self-funding. But George, as you put all these $100,000 into this account, we see it doesn't sustain itself indefinitely, which is my understanding of what a total liability, that number, that's what it means, is that if you're at that point, you have a fully sustainable program. Am I missing something here?
I don't know what assumptions they use for interest rates. And yeah, I really don't know all the assumptions that they use. They may have used higher interest rate than this because they're looking farther out. But when I put this here and call that our beginning balance along with these, it does run out of money, 2063.
So is that?
But maybe they're using an interest rate assumption of that because they're thinking long term, and that
I mean,
that
it just
starts to go
seems
down.
crazy to me that, if the actuary said that 2.5 million is what it takes, and they gave you those numbers of what the current expenses are and forecast them out forever, something, either they made a mistake or
It depends on the assumptions that they make, Mike. You have to read the assumptions in the report to know exactly what they did. And I can try and align this to those. It could be interest rates. They might also be making assumptions about contributions beyond this point. Just because we have the liability funded now doesn't mean that we stop paying into the fund.
I mean, I'm
No,
just looking, the first assumption I see is 6.8% investment rate of return. which is a huge number. Unless I'm misreading this on page 17 of the report.
So look,
Um,
so look at your ending balance. It continues to grow.
Yeah. There are a lot of assumptions in this report that are really.
They might not make any sense now.
Assumptions. I mean, if I don't know what they're assuming the increase.
It just seems odd that you can put hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars into this, and it doesn't, and you run out of money in, 40, 50 years. Something just doesn't make sense with this
So
whole
Mike,
thing.
they're assuming a rate of return of 6.8%. I mean, so again, it's
Yeah,
all
Mike.
about the assumptions. So
That's right. When I put
That's
in,
what that was based on.
I'm sorry, AJ. I
No, no,
just
go
want to
ahead.
say, when I put in the beginning balance that they say needs to be the funding in this year, and I use their interest rate assumption, and we don't put any of our money in like we were before. In fact, I'm taking money out here, and maybe I should take it out sooner, but it continues to grow. So it's doing exactly what they're saying.
Yeah. The thing with what we're looking at here right now is we're reducing the left side of the equation due to current interest rates, but the costs on the right side are also going to go down. So, we need to work on both sides simultaneously. With, the assumptions on both sides have to be worked simultaneously.
This is a very simple model. It takes
Yeah.
the beginning balance, it adds your interest rate and whatever contributions you put in, and it gets you your ending balance, and it just repeats that, and then it starts subtracting out if we want to. It's a very simple model.
Yeah, but I'm talking about column H, the cost. That's based on a certain increase in costs every year too. And those costs are probably based on some higher inflation rate than what we're dealing with right now.
Well,
Yeah, until we were to take some of the suggestions that we heard where we might change the way we fund this or the way we pay people vesting or making early retirees pay a higher amount, until we make decisions like that, the best information we can possibly have is what the actuaries do. They have standards that they have to meet. And this is what the state is expecting, is that we're going to be building, we're going to be funding based on those standards.
Okay. Yeah, well, if that's the case, I think going to your point and Mike's point earlier is, yeah, the rates are much lower than what we plugged into this some years ago.
And again, the actuaries are looking at long-term interest rates over the course of 30 years, and they know that it's not going to be 2% forever. Who knows? I mean, it's been low in my adult life, most of it. And what was the other point I was going to make?
Never lower than this.
Oh my
Well,
God.
when do we go to negative? The Fed's may be issuing bonds with negative interest rates
They
soon.
do it in Europe, right? So anyways, so think about that. I don't know, if as a committee, we're ready to talk about how to proceed with this and what kind of options there are. I mean, Becky's got a reasonable option where we slowly phase in $10,000 increases each year in the budget, and we get it up to 100 now by using free cash, as opposed to what we've been doing where we were putting in 50,000 a year and maybe throwing big dollars in here 1 or 2, 3 years when we have excess cash. And we can play with those assumptions. We can do it many different ways. This is certainly a nice, smooth way of doing things.
I'd like to make a point, may I?
Sure.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, first of all, the whole basis of this study and this tool and the actuarial mandate is to set up a trust fund that will earn money and that will offset the increased costs in the future by us donating money now. However, we're not getting anything for our money, so that kind of screws up that whole notion. And so we're paying a considerable amount of money to retirees' healthcare right now, and we're throwing in extra money beyond that into a fund, and we're not getting anything for it. And the thing that's not being mentioned here is this is taxpayers' money that's going to a fund is earning nothing, and we have a really serious issue with our taxes in this town. And many of us are concerned that we have to do something about that. This is a place we could do something about it. So rather than just throwing $100,000 of tax money against this into this account that's not earning anything, we should look at other ways to address this problem. And one of them is to reduce some of the costs going forward. I think that's probably the simplest way to look at it. And I think, frankly, that Medicare for all may not come overnight. George, you're right about that. We've been waiting a long time for it. But as Becky pointed out, we have now municipal employees involved in Medicare. We didn't have that 20 years ago. We have Joe Biden, who might become president of the United States, who says he's going to support extending Medicare benefits to people 60 years old, which will also change these numbers. So, you know, we have to be concerned about the taxpayers' position in this whole discussion. We haven't mentioned that at all yet. This is going to push our tax bill up.
I feel like we're working, that the Finance Committee of Shutesbury has the capacity to do only certain things. It can't change the state statute. It can't change the interest rates, but it can work on a plan that does what the state has been telling us is you need to save up that money, whether you think it's for nothing or for no benefit, that doesn't matter. It's part of what the state wants us to do because there is a liability and because that liability will need to be paid. So I feel like working on the parts we can, which is how much money should we set aside, and looking at the projection, I believe we do need to increase it. And in the very least, once we get to $1 million, we start changing the interest rates we get.
Point is to be able to fund it in the future.
George, it's hard to hear you.
And the point of it is to fund it in the future, is to have funds so that we can fund it in the future, so that we don't continue to pay this out of the operating budget. It is not a current benefit. There's no question about that. It's a long-term benefit. And the taxpayers are going to be suffering in these early years and getting, you know, that's the way it works. That's the way it operates. And part of it is because we have failed to fund this. We should have been funding this right from the beginning. And had we done that, we probably might not, you know, I don't know. I can't predict to tell you what it would have saved us, but we probably wouldn't be spending quite as much as we are now. It's the time value of money, and putting money aside sooner is always to our benefit. If you want to roll the dice and say Biden's going to win, the Senate's going to go Democrat, and they're all going to just push through universal health care, and you don't want to risk putting this money aside, okay, that's something we certainly should talk about. But, and you've got these options. There are maybe ways to lower this for sure. But again, let's think about the different options. Let's put them down on paper, and I'm happy to crank out all the numbers and give you a chart of how they look for each different scenario.
Yeah, George, we all have this spreadsheet, I think now, right? We all
Yeah.
can all play around with this, and
Sure.
we can do our own modeling.
Be careful because there are some formulas in there, but you know, if you got a question,
Yeah.
ask it to me. If you play with it and something doesn't look right, send me the spreadsheet and say, why is this like this? You know, if I can help you, I can. You know, if there's a flaw in this, if there's something wrong with it, we need to find that. So if we stress test it, that's to our benefit. You know, I make mistakes. I can tell you that for sure. I can tell you we did hand this to the treasurer back when Gabe was, Volker was our treasurer, and she looked it over and she thought it was pretty good. She said it is a tool that helps us for what we're trying to accomplish. I know the town of Hadley has it. Becky, did you ever hear from him about what he thought about this?
Oh, he thought, David Nixon thought it was great. He really appreciated it.
Okay. So, yeah, I went down there one day and handed it to him and walked him through it. And he seemed happy at the time. He just wanted to play with it. So, again, you know, we don't have to make decisions anytime soon. We've already got a decision made. We're putting in $50,000 a year. But we need to kick the can around on some of these things. Bob, if you think there's a chance we can lower the annual cost, I can model that. I'll say it goes up at a smaller rate, and I'll decrease these numbers. Clearly, they're going to have a positive effect. So we can do all those things.
Becky, has our treasurer looked into, has looked around to see whether there is perhaps a better return from another bank? I guess this is all out of the East Hampton Savings Bank, but I was just wondering whether there's been any attempt to see whether we can get a better deal somewhere else.
I can't tell you the answer to that question. I don't know what the answer is.
Can I throw in one more comment there, Jim?
Yeah, sure, Michael.
so I put in 2.488 million in the starting balance here, and we run out of money in 2071. So there, something isn't making sense with this chart or something like that. I just want to throw that out.
And as far as the assumptions go, like we didn't have an increase in our health insurance for 3 years. And this, George, does this model show we increased by 2.5% every year?
You have to look at the actuary report. That's here. That's in their numbers. I just lifted these numbers out of their report.
Okay.
So we got to see what their report says. This is weird, huh?
Yeah.
Did you look? Did you check on this, Becky? No.
I just changed a couple things. I didn't go through all the numbers, all the formulas.
Spent a lot of time. I can look at those numbers and make sure I got them right. I got them from one of these tables. Yeah, I'm not going to look for it now, but I checked. I mean, I thought I put them all in right, but I don't know that I remember seeing increase and then a decrease. But that could be based on somebody they think is coming out sooner based on the actuary tables. And then, of course, they're making those assumptions about growth going into long run, which it does. But like I said, it's a very simple model. It's not brain surgery doing this kind of thing, adding interest rate, adding what we put in. And again, when we put in the 2448 and we take out all our contributions and change this interest rate to use the same assumption that they're using, we don't run out of money. It continues to grow. And it's just a simple, very simple thing. Now, you know, we can play around with how much and when we start taking money out. That will certainly bring this down, but that's a pretty hefty number. That's it.
I think one other point I'd like to make is that philosophically, this is saying that Shutesbury will help pay for a safety net for a group of people. And that was voted on by the town and it's supported by the state law. And it says that when a person reaches a certain age, the safety net to help them pay their health insurance is a function of the town as well as other safety nets all around us. And that's the truth. I think that's the truth. It's part of being a community.
So how do we want to go forward? As George mentioned, kicking the can down the sidewalk or whatever. How do we all want to digest this ourselves for some time and maybe come back at some future meeting to consider some different options?
I think it's real important to come, you know, I wanted to lay this groundwork early. So as you start to look through your budget and are considering everything else going on financially in town, that this is a piece that you would return to for a conversation in that context.
So as we get into the budget process for the next fiscal year, this would be a topic, is how what we want to fund in this line, in the OPEB line.
Yeah.
For the next, okay.
Thanks for doing that, George. It was really useful.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, really nice.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the supporting documents too, Becky, that you sent to us on all of this. Much appreciated.
Thank you. You're going to take the screen, or should I stop? I was going to stop sharing. There we go.
Okay, we still got a bunch of stuff here. Do we want to get into the regional school assessment methodology? Or is there something we think is more important on the agenda that we want to jump into right now?
The Chapter 70 funding and the impact of Section 21 has a comment period that ends October 16th.
Yeah.
So I think it would be good if we talked about that a little bit, which also has to do with our assessment.
Okay, why don't we get into that now, unless somebody has an issue with that. Becky, you sent us something. Is it the letter from the select board has drafted that relates to this? Or,
What I sent was a packet that had the regional budget and the regional assessment. Just as a reminder that the current assessment is the 45% of statutory. That's what was agreed to, and that's defined. There's a chart for that in the budget, the regional budget. Did everyone see that packet? That piece?
yeah, does everybody know what Becky's referring to?
Yes.
Or
So,
do we want to, Becky, do you want,
Jim, can you bring it up?
it's the table.
it's an Excel form or is it in a,
Yeah, it's in an Excel form. Sorry.
It's in the package you sent yesterday, right, Becky?
Yep.
Across the top has the formula for the assessment to change.
The name of the file is Regional Alt Agreement
Yep.
Letter? Oh, no, that's the letter.
No, that's just the letter that we had to send just to verify that's where we
Right.
ended up this year.
Yeah, it was an interesting letter. I didn't realize that the other communities were using a different method than us.
No, they're not.
According to the letter, they were.
No. No, everyone agreed to the 45% statutory.
Well, the way I read the letter, it said 45 for Shutesbury and then a different method for the others. 45 five-year average minimum with the remainder of the assessment allocated to the member towns in accordance with the per pupil method under section 6. That's the
All-
letter.
Yeah, all 4 towns were assessed the same. But they didn't have Amherst yet because Amherst didn't close their budget until July. So that might be, I think they're just talking about the 45% and the other piece. The other piece, not, only
other piece.
45% went under statutory and the remainder for everybody.
Everybody else was, every other part of it was per pupil.
Per pupil as opposed to a rolling average.
Well, even the per pupil is rolling average,
Yeah,
right?
that was a rolling average too.
Oh, okay. All right. When I hear per pupil, I don't think of the rolling average because that's the way it used to be. They used to call it per pupil.
But it was set up to be per pupil over a 5-year period to roll out, to deal with some of the population changes.
Yes. To smooth out the population changes.
Right.
Jim, do you have the spreadsheet?
I do. Do you want me to share it?
That'd be great. Just
All right. Did you set me up for sharing?
I did already.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the regional budget adjustments that they made. And so if you go to the third page, I think the next page, Jim, is what we're looking for. Those were all the cuts they made. And this is where we ended up in May. We finally, if you go down just a little, this is the budget that we finally ended up with after all the cuts. So if you go down even further, we'll see the assessment formula that we ended up with.
That's it.
This here?
Yeah, if we could flip it, perfect.
And it too, or blow it up a little.
Guys, you guys are testing all my
Chops.
skills here.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Jim.
Can you all see that or do you want it bigger?
That's good.
That's good.
The column that says at the top 45% statutory 5-year average,
That's where we ended up with all 4 towns agreeing.
right?
The 1.675 is what's in our budget.
Yep. So
So
just,
if we went to,
I'm sorry, George.
no, nothing, nothing.
Is everyone familiar with this spreadsheet? I know Melody is, I'm sure not. She hasn't been through the assessment conversation before. So Melody, what we have been working on the last number of years is to move towards the statutory method in how regions are funded by state aid through Chapter 70. And we've been trying to convince the other towns to move in that direction. It's taken a number of years, but at 45%, we're almost halfway there. And it means a huge amount to our budgets. Last year, for the final budget in FY20 for Shutesbury, the final assessment was $1,775,000 on the far left column. And this year's budget was almost exactly $100,000 less for the town of Shutesbury. We got it dropped to $1,675,000. Part of the conversation was the fact that Shutesbury was moving towards, was almost at, we were over $24 per thousand. And you can't go above $25 per thousand legally. So we wouldn't have been able to fund anything if it had gone too high. We wouldn't have been able to fund a higher line item from the regional school. So
Why does Shutesbury pay so much more than others?
there's two different things happening. One is the assessment methodology. We get a lot more aid than the other communities. Like at the elementary school level, we get almost $600,000 in aid every year, and Leverett and Pelham get about $200,000 in aid. We've had higher enrollments, but at this point we're very close to the numbers in Leverett.
At the regional population level?
Yep. At the region, yep, and the elementary school. So it's a factor of all the enrollments. There's a 5-year rolling average included, even with the statutory. So if there is a dramatic change in a single year, it takes time for it to show up, and is usually modified by something going in the other direction. But that's why we have continued to fight, because we feel that all our income figures and our property evaluation totals are dramatically different than the other towns. Even Pelham has is larger in income and larger in property valuations than Shutesbury, but they're smaller. They're a smaller community. So there's a state formula that they use to calculate the aid. And there's about 4 or 5 different worksheets to figure that out. That I'd be happy to go through with you for the regional, the 4 towns in the region. Maybe at the next meeting, if you guys have an appetite for it, because that really gets to the heart of why we're concerned about the changes that the state is discussing on removing the safe harbor and also removing the caps, an 82% cap. Right now, Leverett and Pelham don't get as much aid, but they're being held harmless. So they still continue to get, a few $100,000. In the case of Amherst, and Amherst is the real area that we have a problem with. Amherst is subject to losing potentially $3 or $4 million, which as the biggest member of our community would have a very dramatic impact on our town if that were to happen. So the issue that's being raised at the Department of Education is very serious for our community. It would be a dramatic transition for the region. I don't think it would impact the amount of state aid that Shutesbury gets at the elementary level, because we clearly don't have those other safe harbor and the other protections that the other members in our community have currently to keep their aid numbers up. The hold harmless meant that when changes were made in the formula, the changes were made to the formula, but the numbers were not allowed to decrease for communities. So the hold harmless kept aid at an established level. And in in Amher's case, it's around $6 million in Chapter 70 aid. So that's what's at risk. And I think what we just are hoping that people in the community will write a letter to the state supporting, asking that these changes not, either that they not happen or that they be transitioned into over a number of years. It would be, a real hit for our regional school. As minus, if we lose $4 million, that's
12% of the budget? Something like that?
Yeah.
What's the budget?
What is that, George?
It's like 12% of the budget. What's the budget these days? 32 grand? Yeah,
it's 32. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's killer.
So I need some clarifications. The stuff that's mentioned in the MMA letter, those changes that are going to be reviewed for Section 21, will they affect the statutory formula or other aid lines for education?
They impact the statutory formula because the process in the statutory formula goes into, okay, there's a worksheet. It's like the third page in for each community, and it's called the increments towards the goals. And then a preliminary contribution is above the target share or below the target share. And there's a calculation to hold harmless. This is not on those worksheets.
Those aren't on
This
those.
is-
So where are those worksheets? Is it in the MMA article?
No, you have to dig through, and that's what I was offering that I could. It gets really complicated. It's going to take another, I'd like to get these all to you ahead of time. But without some framework of what's happening, it would be impossible to read. So
Yeah.
it's how it's part in the DESE worksheets. Every chapters, when we go into Chapter 70, if you go into the DES section with Chapter 70 calculations, they determine for each town, you can look at each town individually. They review the equalized valuation, the income from 2 years prior. They get a combined yield effort. And then they figure out where your percentage is in relationship to your goal. And then they cap things, then they cap what they are going to require you to spend, dependent on whether your preliminary contribution is above or below the target. And that's where it's within that calculation. There's a special, number 24 is a special increment towards an 82.5% target. And And that's if your preliminary contribution is below the target share. So that basically it's the hold harmless. They save you from being required to pay more money. I mean, they save you from, because they keep giving you more aid. And it's that pocket of aid to wealthy communities they're trying to eliminate.
So I want to write a comment to the DESE, I guess. That's where it'd be directed.
Mm-hmm.
And is the concern not so much for Shutesbury only, but for the towns in our region will be affected pretty differently by this formula change?
Yeah. Yes.
And I wondered if there had been some work to deal with rural aid. I think Hines was one of the guys doing that. Will Shutesbury still be, I think Shutesbury received some kind of aid from rural status, didn't we?
Yeah, I think it was $30,000.
Yeah. And so, so the change
That's
of,
another piece.
yeah, so the changes that the MMA is warning about, that's one of the ones we might lose?
I don't think so. I think the issue is more about the regions and not just rural aid. I think that his concern is that if they do take rural aid, they're trying to give, you know, if they take away the hold harmless, there's going to be millions and millions of dollars redistributed. And towns like Amherst will get hardly anything because if they are determined to be too wealthy by the formula, they will, if they lose their hold harmless, they lose millions of dollars.
Is there a possibility that because we're in COVID times and who the hell would know what's Amherst revenue picture looks like, that this whole thing could get pushed down the road until we settle out, until our economies settle out?
I think they need support in the message. You know, I'm sure Amherst said they're reaching out to address it, but I think the more other towns support them, even if we're not in the same situation, I think it's important because, like you said, Amherst is already seeing a dramatically more stress than Shutesbury. And this would just be another devastating blow.
Becky, let me just say, tell me if I'm mistaken, but you said that there's going to remove the, they're going to perhaps reduce Amherst Chapter 70 money by $3 million because they'll remove the whole, the hold harmless clause or whatever. But that money won't necessarily be redistributed to us and to other towns. I think that the state funding is going to go down. I mean, that seems to be a pretty plausible projection this year. The state revenues are also way down, right?
Yep, that's a very valid point, but the objective of changing the legislation was for the purpose of redirecting those funds into urban areas.
And urban areas.
Yeah.
And
like
so
Holyoke or you know, areas that have shown a much higher need.
Yeah.
right, that's what it is. And those areas are lobbying, and those areas are much, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're probably much better represented than our rural communities are in terms of their ability to lobby.
Yeah. At Boston, there are very, you know, Chelsea, a lot of very needy communities are trying to free up sources of revenue for themselves. I mean, they've documented their need. The state's claiming they have no capacity to fund any higher. And so this is a tactic to redistribute.
Right.
And it could be distributing a smaller pot of money as well, like you said, Bob. If it goes through, it would be distributing a smaller pot of money,
Right,
potentially.
right.
But I will, do you guys want me to send you out these town by town spreadsheets? Are you interested in them?
When you say town by town spreadsheets, related to,
Spreadsheets that are used to determine each individual town in the region's required contribution and the calculation of the state aid.
It's the chapter 70 calculations, right?
and
Yeah,
this,
and
and this
I'll
will help
take it.
us
I'll take a
understand
copy.
what the impact of this section 21, what the impact of section 21?
hopefully it would. It could, it's very confusing at first. But I'm happy to answer. I'll send them out, and if you have questions, I'll try to answer them if you guys are interested. It's getting into the weeds, like when 6 years ago or so, when we had that summer committee where we just worked on the calculation of chapter 70 in detail and worked it through. We're just giving you a look, or I can just give you a link to where you can find them on your own. But
The interesting things on it are how much aid are the other communities getting for elementary school? That number pops right off the pages, and also what their income calculations are by the state. So if you look at a town like Leverett versus a town like Shutesbury, same population, relatively the same population, but if you look at the total income collected at the state level from income taxes from Leverett residents versus Shutesbury residents, you see a tremendous difference in the dollar amount. And that's relates back to the amount of aid that they get for the elementary school and we get for our elementary school. Our elementary school is like 3 times as much as they get. It used to be anyways. And then if you look at the regional level, again, how much aid goes into the region for each of our towns is laid out in these schedules, and you can compare the towns and see why we benefit so much more from the statutory method, because so much more money comes into the region per pupil for us than for the other students, than the other towns, excuse me. So
it is harder to decipher the regional, how it's broken. No, it's much easier on the district level than on the secondary level because they tend to combine them.
It would actually be good if we could summarize it all on a single table and everybody could just look at it at the high level.
That would be George.
I don't know how much time I'm going to have to do that between now and next January, but if I can, I'll give it a shot.
Okay. So
I guess my impression, the way this discussion is going is if this goes through the way the state is proposing right now with section 21, there's going to be more motivation from a perspective of Shutesbury to go forward with statutory.
I would have thought the opposite.
Huh?
Yeah,
I would have thought the opposite.
right.
I mean, if Amherst is going to lose $4 million in state aid, I think it completely changes the dynamics of us asking, getting closer to the 100% statutory.
I guess I was looking at it from the perspective that we're the ones that are still the bigger winners from a standpoint of funding. So we're going to need to spread that across the region. We need to spread what we're getting, our state funding, across the region.
And
Which is the way I would interpret that. We're the one that comes out ahead as far as this funding. And doesn't that mean that we would need to be allocating more to the region?
That's not statutory. Statutory we get full benefit of our funding, our increase.
That's my point.
See how the formula goes. But the other thing is our future, our existence is tied to what happens to all the towns in the region. If Amherst takes a big hit on their budget, they're going to start squeezing out the school. And that's our education. I mean, so we're not apart from it. We're part of it.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I understand that. I'm just thinking from an overall town of Shutesbury perspective, is there going to be more pressure from Shutesbury as a town because there's going to be more of a gap. There's going to be more of a gap.
I think
And
that,
there might be more pressure from a Shutesbury perspective to go statutory.
I'm not following the argument, I'm afraid, Jim.
Yeah.
Well,
'Cause I
one of the things,
think the overall resources are going to diminish.
and the amount of aid is going to diminish, so the benefit of the statutory method for us is going to diminish because that difference, there's less money that we're fighting over. It's hard to tell, but I think the statutory method won't be as attractive to us, but it probably still would be because we're still a town that's considered of having greater need.
That's right.
Do we have a process that meets again with all 4 towns to say we're now at 45% statutory? Next year we will do X. Is that a negotiation that happens, and when does it happen?
Usually in December.
Before
And
town
that's
meeting.
what, another reason to have this conversation is, especially with new members, returning members, understanding the assessment formula. And this is a year where it could get all upside down.
Or sideways.
Important. Yeah,
It's
go
definitely
side.
going to go sideways. How can it not, with Amherst having the problems they're having and now this?
Right.
Becky, did anybody write a draft letter that's floating around that we could all take and modify to our style and then send in? It would be helpful if somebody had a draft letter that hit the key points that not all of us are going to think of.
I haven't seen one, but I'll reach out to Amherst tomorrow.
That'd be great because, you know, I can hand it out to my friends and a few people and, you know, get us the addresses. And if we all do that, we could, you know, get something out there. And I wouldn't mind CCing it to Joe and to Natalie. And we got to beat the bushes on this one. We really do. But, you know, communities are looking at Amherst. #1 rated every year. Every time we go to the 4-town meeting, they talk about how great their school is and how it wins awards. And then you drive down the Hoyoke, they're looking up at us, and what are they thinking? They want some of our money. Enough's enough is the way they're thinking. So we got an uphill battle on this, if you ask me. I think we've had it good for a long, long time. We can't assume that it's going to stay that way.
Right.
But part of section 20 was identifying what funding is needed to make good education. And it's not clear to me that the conclusion should be that section 21 takes the money away that's already being distributed to some of the towns. I'm not sure that that's a great conclusion. I don't know.
But I think the problem, Susie, I think the problem is their efforts.
Oops.
4 or 5 years ago, I talked to Steve Kulik, and at that point, they really needed to triple the amount of state aid to give relief to the cities and towns, because right now we're paying over 50% for education compared to the state. And the goal had been for it to be at 50% under Deval Patrick, and we've gone way the other direction.
Right.
So, they need so much money to do it. And one effort they did is to rewrite the foundation budget, which is supposed to increase the amount of money every town spends.
Right.
And it should increase the amount of state aid.
Right.
Eventually, but, they always skirt around the funding piece. And that's what Hines has been trying to create a model that at some point the funding piece has to be addressed.
Right.
And if that does happen, then all the communities will be in better shape.
Right.
But this is a COVID year, so it's not going to be easy for the state to increase funding. It's going to be reduced in all likelihood, if anything.
Right.
Anchor town in our anchor city is going to have a hard time next year with their budget.
They are. And they're going to be pushing to reduce the budget in the regional school. And, despite what Susie says, which is true about us being a community and being together, we're little dogs. They're the big dog. Amherst has a lot more students. They have a lot more, they have a bigger piece of the action. And if they're losing their protection under being held harmless, that means that they're just going to lose a large subsidy that they were getting that might be taken away from them. which is going to have a big impact on them. And I can just anticipate what we're going to see before town meeting. They're going to want to slash the budget of the regional school, along with the rest of their budget. I mean, don't you see that coming?
There's no question. Becky, what's the budget in Amherst? Their full operating budget?
5 million, I think.
25, 20?
65.
No, because it used to be around 40. I think it's over 50. It's more.
Yeah, so if they lose, what'd you say, 3 million? Wow.
3 million, yeah, it's
Yeah.
Yeah, but George, last year they were talking about $100,000 like it was the end of the world, and they had a $60 million budget. So
That's in front of us.
yeah, right.
They do have, their tax rate in that town is so high, but anyways.
So we can talk about going for 50% statutory at our next conversation.
I don't know if this is the year to ask for anything. I think we need to just go to the meeting and see which way the wind is blowing. And, I think everything goes on hold this year. I mean, 45% is pretty good. The difference between 45% and 50% for us is about $12,000.
Yeah.
And
If
ours
we
is
could
going
hold steady, it'd be great.
ours is probably, our assessment's probably going to go down even if we don't change the method, because the 5-year rolling minimum contribution is still growing in our favor, right? The statutory method, our portion of the statutory method, we're still not getting the full 5 years of it because it's building up. Because when we moved into it, I'm not sure about that. I'd have to go back and look at my notes. But nobody is going to be sympathetic to us asking for more. In fact, probably the opposite is going to happen.
Especially if our
Absolutely.
tax rate goes down.
Yes, which they will know by the time we meet with them, right? Because the rates will be set.
Yeah.
Is there any timing now for meeting with them?
Meeting with the assessor?
No, 4 towns.
Four
Four
towns.
towns.
Oh, no, not the 4-town meeting. Because that's, what are we going to do? Is it going to be on Zoom?
Great.
I hope not. I hope there's a real meeting outside or something.
Oh, it's no fun without the body language.
Or the grouping, seeing who sits near who?
Oh, yeah, right.
They could hold it in the gym so that there's more space.
Yeah, I don't know.
How engaged is Amherst right now on this issue? Becky, you have any sense for that? How suited up they are, or are they?
I haven't gotten back to Sean since I talked to him right after I got the news. So I'll have to check him. I don't have the answer to that either.
Is Sean back? Is that the deal?
No.
Sean is the new finance director of Amherst.
For the whole town.
Great, great. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was so excited. Yeah, he's he didn't like the job that he had, and they immediately hired him as the finance director in Amherst.
That's good.
Oh.
So Becky, you thought you might be able to get a sample letter from Amherst that you could circulate to us, and we could add our own 2 cents and share it. Okay.
Yep.
Great.
If we're going to move on, I'd just like to say, just in response to what George said, I don't think there's any reason we should not continue to move towards the statutory method. That's the deal we had with the other towns last year. And I feel that that's the right way to go. And there's no reason why that we should not be pressing for that at our meeting.
It's going to be interesting.
Sure. Life is interesting.
If I could, I'd just like to add to that. I think townspeople are expecting to continue to move towards statutory. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of them were figuring we were going to be at statutory years before now. So to delay that any further, I think is going to be a problem at town meeting, as a matter of fact.
Okay. Well, it is 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Do we want to keep on charging forward? Do we want to try to tackle a couple of key agenda items?
I think we could abbreviate the capital planning process and and have that one come back when we, what did it say? AJ, in the minutes, you said October 20.
Which would be our next meeting.
Yeah. So that would, given that it's 9 o'clock right now, maybe we could just move it to then.
Yeah, before we get off that, Becky, thanks for sending out all that documentation regarding capital. The history back to, what was it, 2013, as well as the most recent 35-year plan.
Well,
Yeah, so maybe in preparation for our next meeting, we can all individually take a look at what Becky sent us so that we can power through that topic efficiently.
and there might be, capital plan is meeting tomorrow night. So there might be, they might make some changes or updates. And if they do, I'll get those out to you guys after the capital plan meeting.
Cool. And Becky, you just sent out, you sent to us this afternoon an expense report, which must have been hot off the press. You must have just gotten that.
Yep.
So is there anything on that you want to point out that you think we should be digesting or talking about tonight?
I didn't see anything dramatic. There's, most things are falling in line. I'm sorry, I'm just looking quickly through. I didn't flag anything when I looked at it earlier.
Yeah, or I don't know if anybody else has had a chance to look since Becky sent this out, I think just before meeting or this afternoon sometime.
I think the one thing I saw was the school choice and charter. We've had $20,000 in charges so far. That might, I don't know, if that's going to be a quarterly, it's not too bad. It's better than we've been seeing. We were up to 90,000, I think, in choice earlier. So that was the main problem I saw.
Becky, just remind us, there's no budget for those two line items.
Right, we don't budget, but we take a hit for them.
Why don't we put them in the budget?
Well, we have, they are in the revenue side. I do put a figure in and I do adjust it through the assessments because it's on the assessment on the cherry sheet. So we do budget for it, but we can't use the funds like the choice money that's coming in. I don't include that in the total of the budget because we can't touch it.
Okay. I think
Any questions on that?
not sure I followed, but that's all right. We'll talk about it again another time.
And since I do see Kevin Rudin here, I want to mention that I've asked to see if he might be available for the next meeting. If you guys would like to, he's getting close to figuring out the total valuation of the town. And it would be good for the finance committee to review those figures as they come in. If you guys would like to do that, because it'll have an impact on the tax rate.
Okay, so is that something, is everybody good for adding that to the agenda for next meeting?
Yep.
So Kevin, you're okay for October 20?
Yeah,
Joining
Becky, are we also going to add the exemption?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm also drafting a bill, a home rule petition to create what's called a means-tested tax exemption for needy seniors. And I'll be able to preview that to you folks at that meeting.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
It's a something I've been researching for about 5 years for my own town and listening to the comments made at the annual town meeting in the special town meeting. I went to Becky, refreshed the idea. She discussed it with the select board and they kind of asked me to research it. And I'm just about done with the explanation of how it would work and what it would mean to people.
Great.
Thank you.
So you said the 20th, I'm fine with that.
Cool.
And if I put Kevin on starting at 7:15,
Doesn't matter when, Becky.
okay.
7:15?
Sound
Is
okay?
okay?
Good idea.
Just so we don't have to tie you up, Kevin, throughout. We'll lock in 7:15.
That doesn't bother me at all, as you can tell it. You probably can't see, I've been working at home at my desk while listening to you,
Okay.
but it's not a
You're
problem.
welcome to join us for the duration, of course.
Not a problem, but I expect to have the valuations all complete by then. Just as expected, we're looking at, just so you know, we're looking at for fiscal 21's tax rate, we're looking at the period from mid-calendar 18 through all of calendar 19. You're always behind.
Okay.
And there was sizable, not sizable, but values went up, shall we say. Not a lot, but they went up.
Do you know when the tax rate will get set?
Classification hearing we scheduled today, Becky, was when?
I think it's November 10th.
November 10th. So
Yep, November 10th.
so give the Department of Revenue another 2 days after that, but that for all intents and purposes will be the day we know.
Okay.
At that hearing, and then the formality is the Department of Revenue has to certify that rate, which usually is a formality. I've already started sending them the necessary forms, and I anticipate having that. Right now, I need to talk to Gail Weiss on Thursday afternoon to find out where she is in her part of the recap sheet. And then it's just a matter, I've got 5 forms to file. And the next Board of Assessors meeting, we have one next week if needed, one the last week in October, at which time we're once they sign off, we should be ready to go. So at the latest, November 10th, maybe even earlier.
Great.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
No problem.
Thanks.
Thank you, Select Board.
Anybody attend, any of our FinCom reps attend whether it be school or personnel board or?
I was going to ask about that. I haven't been invited to anything or have they been notified? How do we get?
Melody, the problem is I need to schedule a meeting because the chair resigned, and that's the holdup. You have been put on the list and I have your email with the group, but I haven't managed to push a date through. There's been a lot of COVID reporting that's been required through the 15th. So I'm going to try to schedule it right after the 15th.
And then there's capital planning tomorrow. So is it Bob or AJ or both? You be able to join tomorrow?
Yes, we can report on that when we come back on the 20th.
Yeah. Jim, anything new on from broadband or that we all should know about? Or
No, there's no news, just the usual problems with repairs here and there and one thing or another, but nothing new to report.
Okay.
But there might be a new big
Big box, a big orange box next to the hut.
Oh, cool.
So that'll be kind of exciting, I suppose.
Yeah.
You can keep trash bags in there.
Yeah. Well,
What's
not exactly.
What are you talking about, Jim?
Well,
That's not going into the minutes, Bob.
We would like to store all of the parts that are used by whether it's Tri-Wire, Certex, or Whip City Fiber. I think Whip City Fiber is actually doing most of our repairs. around the town when, you know, a tree falls on a line or something like that. We're going to store all those parts and accessories, fiber cable, the works in a box outside rather than, which should cut down on the traffic in and out of the hut, because when you get people you don't know inside the hut, bad things can happen. And so it's a security measure as well as trying to make it a little, you know, things run a little bit more smoothly for our repair folk.
Yeah, makes total sense. Thanks.
All right. No other meetings for report? Okay. Any other items that anyone wants to bring up? I see Jeff had something earlier. I don't see Jeff on here right now.
I would just like to say, Jim, if I may,
Yeah.
like, get a comment about the choice money, and I'd like us to discuss that more, to sort of talk about that some, because I think that we need to do that. I think that should be included in the budget, and we don't need to talk about it tonight, but I just wanted to say that I'd like us to return to that maybe next time.
And I just want to flag again that by state statute, we can't build it into the budget. It's the school committee's charge to determine how that money is spent. And they have developed out a policy and have started calling on those funds in their budgeting to help keep their budgets lower. So that is happening, and tracking that would be an important piece of that conversation.
Be happy to.
I guess I'm a little confused on this. And Becky, you mentioned that we on the income side we show something here, but not on the, we can't show it on the expense side.
Well, we show what the choice money is so people can be aware of it, but there's a notation that's not included in the revenue because by state law, it cannot be, only the school authorities can direct the spending of that money. So the finance committee cannot allocate those funds for a specific purpose like you can with other revenue funds in the budget.
We have this conversation now. I'll be happy to do that.
Let's not do it.
Other towns do include it in the revenue side along with state grants. We don't have a lot of control over the school budget, Becky, as you know. They have all the discretion about where the money goes. We don't actually determine precisely their budget. They actually delineate their budget to explain where the money's going, but they can move things around as they see fit. What I'm arguing is that is a revenue source, just like state grant money is a revenue source, which is also listed on their budget, and it should be included. And we, one year, tried to say, count that as revenue, and you argued that we couldn't do that because we're forbidden to do so. I disagree with that. I think that we have to include that as part of their revenue source.
Well, that's really nice, but when the accountant came back to me, handed me the state statute that I shared with all of you at the time, and told me we were not allowed to touch it. She had been advised by DOR that it could not be used in the budgeting process by the finance committee.
Well,
so
I want to interrupt and say I don't want to start this discussion now. It's late, and I need to have more information instead of just listening to two people's presentations.
Yeah. Do we want to add this to the agenda? As you proposed earlier, Bob, do we want to add this to the agenda for our next meeting?
I would like to do that, please.
Okay. I'll make sure it's on the agenda for our next meeting.
What else is on the agenda for the next meeting?
Cap planning.
Review expense report.
Oh, okay. And the assessor, that's right. I was just thinking about, and when's our first?
It's not complete yet, George. We'll still be working on that over the next days too.
And then when's our first meeting with the department heads regarding their budgets?
Okay, we all have the calendar.
November 17th. Highway.
So we got time to talk about that before then. Okay.
Everybody have the calendar for who we're meeting with what weeks?
I don't think I have mine with edits on it, so I don't know I got one that.
It was in the minutes, right?
I
It's
put,
in
I
the
put it
minutes.
in,
Oh, in the minutes. Okay, I
I
didn't get.
put it in the minutes, yeah,
Yeah, thanks, great.
for 9:20.
All right.
Would you mind telling me while I'm on the call so I can throw that in my calendar too?
What do you want on there, Kevin? What?
If you could tell me when I'm meeting with you on the budget, I'll throw it in my calendar.
Oh, it's a secret, Kevin.
January 26th.
Thank you.
Becky, I don't know if the whole finance committee is up to date. We have a letter that went out to the department heads regarding preparing.
I was just making all the copies tonight, so I'm
Okay.
catching up.
So that's heading out. That'll be heading out in the next day or so then,
Mhm.
the letters
Yep.
for them to start working on their budgets. Yep. Okay. Any other topics that we didn't have on the agenda that someone feels we should raise at this point?
Can I make a
Bob.
motion we adjourn?
I'll second that. Do we need to vote?
I guess.
All right, Arvanitis.
Aye.
Dear, aye.
Grove's eye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosher, aye.
Walton, I.
Okay,
Aye, aye.
back again
night,
on
everybody.
Tuesday. And
Good
Good night.
meeting. It's good seeing everybody. You all have a good week and see you all in 2 weeks.
yeah,
Good. Take care, everyone.
thank you.
Good night.
Hey, George, Celtics.
Win.
That was heartbreaking.
It was.
That was heartbreaking.
It was. And the Patriots were heartbreaking last night.
Oh, they didn't have a chance. Once Cam Newton went down, that was it.
Well, I like how the coach tried two different quarterbacks to see who's the better quarterback. I think we know now.
They looked great for 3 quarters. They were right in it for 3 quarters.
Our defense is awesome.
Yeah.
And if our quarterback didn't make those mistakes in the first half, we were in the game right to the end.
Or if he didn't turn it over, at the end of the 3rd quarter, they're marching down the field to the 5-yard line, and then he coughs it up.
Yeah, we had two guaranteed field goals in
I've
both
been
times.
rooting for Tampa
That's the-
Bay.
What's that?
I've been rooting for Tampa Bay too.
Oh, give me a break.
Yeah.
Sayonara, buddy. Have
No,
fun.
I'm rooting for Tampa Bay too.
Oh, you just love
For
Brady.
Tampa Bay are you rooting for Tampa Bay or for Brady?
Well, Tampa Bay because he's there.
Yeah, it's Brady.
He's
You wouldn't be
there.
rooting for Kansas City if he was in Kansas City. Would you have been rooting for Kansas City last night if he was playing for Kansas City?
I was rooting for Kansas City when he wasn't.
Oh.
Oh, so you're not a
I'm sorry. I have a soft spot for Kansas City.
That was the wrong one to bring up, George.
I guess so. Yeah, how did I hit that? It's like the lottery. Oh, well. Hey, as long as the season's interesting, we don't have to win the Super Bowl every year. I just want to make sure that when I watch the game, we have a chance of winning it. As long as that's the case, I'm good. So, and Cam is a stud. I mean, isn't he great? I love
Yeah,
watching him play.
he's fun to watch.
And
He's
they
way
really
more fun than Brady was.
it is. And the way they've just completely revamped their offense to work around his strengths. It's really impressive.
Yeah, and the coaches are doing a great job, I think. I
They are.
was impressed with our team last night. I really
Yeah,
was.
absolutely.